Wagyu Ji Ka Khalsa, Wagyu Ji Ki Fateh, everybody. Thanks for joining. We'll start up here in just a couple minutes. Wagyu Ji Ka Khalsa, Wagyu Ji Ki Fateh, everybody. We're going to start it here just in a couple minutes, just waiting.
What's up, brother? How are you?
How's it going, Paji? How are you? Wagyu Ji Ka
Good,
Khalsa,
good, thank
Wagyu
you.
Ji Ki Fateh.
KhalsaAid Fateh.
So, thank you for joining us here today. I think this is a very important topic that the community should have we probably should have addressed a long time ago, but better late than never. So without further ado, everybody, I want to introduce to you our guest who is kind enough to join us today. His name is Kamaldeep Singh Rai. Everybody knows him as Kim. He is from the west coast of Vancouver. See, now I'm trying to use the Canadian accent, West Coast of Vancouver Island, and he's part of our KhalsaAid Canada team. He's also a national level weightlifting coach for Canada. He competed in Olympic weightlifting himself. He's a brother to two and a father to four, and more importantly to our conversation here today, he's dedicated 20 years to working on the front lines for Indigenous mental health as a senior manager. So welcome, Paji. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Omar. Glad to be here and talk about this very important topic for our community.
So just to start, I guess first, what does it mean to be a senior manager when it comes to Indigenous mental health? What does that mean? Can you tell us a little bit about your training, your background, and what you do as it relates to mental health?
So I started, like I said, 21 years ago, and I started off was what back then used to be called a suicide prevention worker. So the certification in Canada for suicide assessment, and I did that job for about 3-4 years. Then they brought me into junior management, and then I started applying for funding for programs. And then I created a program called the Kuwasa program. Kuwasa just means apana in Indigenous language where we live. And it was the first culturally led clinical program in Canada. The focus was using the Indigenous culture and cognitive therapy as one, right? Not one better than the other. And the focus was intergenerational trauma from residential school, as you guys probably been hearing about what happened to those children. So I was involved in that process for 10 years. I was a lead for Crisis for Canada. And I traveled throughout the nation listening to elder stories. And then I went on to get my somatic experiencing, my clinical trauma certification. And I also worked a lot with sexual offenders, which intergenerational trauma and those kind of offenses, as you know, as a DA, they're close.
Yeah, very closely related. You know, it was interesting hearing about the school situation and finding, that mass grave. some of the articles and some of the commentary by kids, by people, by now adults who had gone to those schools, some of what they said, which I want to touch on later in our conversation, mirrored some of the things that we see in our own community. So I think your experience, even though you've worked with an indigenous community, it directly relates to what our community has felt, the intergenerational trauma as you described.
Yes.
So just to start, can you give us the clinical and then the layman's definition of what is trauma?
Okay. So trauma is an emotional and physical response to a horrific event. Okay. Clinically, we have three types of trauma. Acute, which is like brain fog, confusion, irritation, lack of trust, like panic attacks. That's called acute. Okay. Then we have chronic. So like a community that's been bullied or under marginalized people, like the homeless, our community in India, indigenous here, the Black community. And then we have something called complex. Complex is a mix of both of them. So you've had horrific events happen to you and you're marginalized, and it's at domestic level. Do you want me to talk about some of the responsive trauma?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the emotional ones would be shock, denial, confusion, brain fog, anger, mood swings, guilt, shame, and fear. Those are some of them. There's more. The physical ones would be nightmares, the physical panic attack, fatigue, racing heartbeat, agitation, headaches, even muscle spasms happen. Those are the physical. And trauma is a memory in our brain, right? And this is the way trauma works. So we have something called the amygdala, which is back of our neck, our reptile brain, okay? Now what happens, we've all heard of fight or flight. If you Google a possum being chased by a fox, the possum curls up and plays dead. The fox does not want to eat dead prey. Fox leaves. As possum wakes up and has like seizure attacks, starts convulsing, starts shaking. We're supposed to do that as humans, but we don't. So something terrible happens to us, brother, and we just go on with our lives. We don't discharge. Animals discharge, and they go on their life. We hold on to it. So let's say I'm in a parking lot, and you come up to me in a tank top, and I'm scared of your muscles. I got two choices. I can run, or I can face you. So the back of my brain, the cerebral cortex is the thinking brain, blood flow slows down, and it all goes here. It's quite fascinating how it happens. But after the experience, you've heard of cortisol? Cortisol rushes through our body, okay? And that creates us like we're dead tired. So have we, our family members, our mothers and our fathers and our grandparents, they look at the 1984 photos, have you seen how they get depressed and down for a day or two? That's what that is. Because they go back to the memory. Trauma is a memory, okay? Trauma is a picture in our brain that we can't let go. So, yeah.
And, obviously, some things that we've learned, like domestic violence, abuse within a family, there's cycles to that relationship and how the abuse stops and starts, and the different phases that the relationship goes through. Does trauma have something similar to,
Yes.
an immediate reaction and then a slower reaction, a long-term reaction? Is there something you can expect to see?
Yeah, that's a great question. So typically in the psychology world, we say hurt people hurt people. And you probably see it in the criminal world too. Now, what it is if you look at someone that grew up with an alcoholic father, one person will swear they'll never drink again, okay? And the other person is a total drunk. They're both the same children. Same goes with trauma. If you had trauma in your family, intergenerational, you might be like, hey, I'm not going to go there. I'm going to heal. Or you might be like, I'm repeating the cycle. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So, you know, moving towards the Sikh community, you know, we obviously have the Sikh within the Qawm. We have this, you know, what we refer to as Jazba, you know, Chardi Kala.
Yes.
When we talk about a lot of the trauma that we've suffered, whether it's, you know, the Indian Army's assault on Darbar Sahib or the genocide in Delhi and everything that ensued after that, along with the grief, there's always, we sort of finish the sentence with a celebration of shahadat, right? That we always put while we're talking about something that's very, very traumatic, we always try to look for a positive in it. We celebrate the shahadat, we celebrate the bravery, we celebrate the qurbani of it. You know, you yourself, having seen intergenerational trauma within the indigenous people, do you see signs and symptoms within the Sikh community, even when there's that Chardi Kala atmosphere there? Do you see signs of trauma within the community?
That's a great question, Omar. So we call that the figure eight. You look at trauma, and here's a resource. That Chardi Kala, okay? So we go like this. If we touch here and go and touch here, we're good. If we touch in trauma, it's not good. If we stay in Chardi Kala and we're in denial, that's not good either. We have a touch back and forth. That's called a trauma vortex. Okay? Now, we naturally regulate our systems in the Punjabi community. We're like Chardi Kala, Shaheed hai sade. And then we also have memories and we cry. That's very, very healthy. That's called self-regulation. So within the indigenous communities, that's what we try teaching them, to culturally get resourced back, where they're drumming, they're cedar barking, cultural things. And because the government took that away from them. So we unfortunately, we gotta hire people to teach them that stuff again. And so the same thing we're doing, right? But I also want to add one thing. Us not getting the label of genocide is hurting generations, right? That's really doing a lot of damage to us.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because coming into this conversation, and I may get heat for saying this, you know, I've sometimes thought that, you know, sticking to Chardi Kala and not fully experiencing the pain and the trauma and hitting that rock bottom, you know, for our generation, born and raised here or raised here, being somewhat removed from actually experiencing the violence in Punjab from '84 onwards, that trying to hold on to that Chardi Kala and celebrating the Shahadat was a way of denying the actual pain that we're suffering. But it's refreshing and interesting to know that getting back to that Chardi Kala is actually very healthy. And I think one of the things that you pointed out, not getting the designation that what happened to us and what is still happening to us, whether it's physically or whether it's functionally, you know, getting it designated as genocide is so important to us that all of us feel this drive to make sure that what happened to our people is labeled properly, is designated properly, you know, and we celebrate being able to, and we get flack for it. You know, you go into certain Gurukar and, you know, you sit down, you eat langar and you look around and all you see are the faces of Shaheed, right? And some people criticize that and some people celebrate that. But it's that, I guess it makes sense that that's why the powers that be want to take those pictures away from us. They want to make sure that we don't post pictures of Santji, we don't post pictures of Bayamrik Singh, we don't post pictures of Major General Shabir Singh, because posting them, I guess, from what you're saying, is somewhat therapeutic and cathartic for us to be able to say, these are our heroes, what they did. Their lives being lost has meaning to us, and it brings back some level of dignity and pride, and helps us cope with the trauma. That's interesting and very reassuring to know that that idea of Jardikla has its place in the cycle of trauma. That's amazing.
But you know, the thing is, the reason I bring up genocide designation, there's something in the world of healing called the limbo theory. So not knowing the outcome is worse than a negative outcome. So our kids don't know if it was genocide or not. So they're in limbo. So 3 generations down the road, if they don't designate this, will the kids remember? They won't. That is why the Indian government does not want it labeled, right? And it's really important to understand that intergenerational trauma now is actually something passed on in DNA in some people. So they didn't believe it. Now they believe it, that survivors of traumatic events pass that on to their kids in their DNA.
And that was going to be my next question. How is it that, you know, I was born in the U.S. and raised here, and I was very young in 1984. If I said how old I was, nobody would believe me because of the gray in my body. But you know, I grew up with pictures of what happened in 1984, with stories of the Sangh, and going to the Gurdwara, and I remember being drawn to the Sangh that looked like them. You know, Damadle, Kuliyan, Dariyan, they were my superheroes, right? My son loves Optimus Prime. They were my heroes at that time, and they still are. You know, I still draw a lot of strength from them. And it was always very difficult for me to explain to people how I felt an affinity to a movement that started and sort of reached its peak at a point when I wasn't a part of it. I was too young to be a part of it. So
yeah,
can you talk a little bit about, you know, even if you relate it back to the indigenous population, how is it that kids now whose families are fully intact have a trauma associated with finding out that there's kids buried at these schools in Canada?
Thank you. So first I'll talk about our community. You know, we lost family members. We watched our sisters get raped in the streets, okay? Horrible, horrible crimes happened against us. And our parents carry that. They carry that. I remember I was 8 years old when this happened. And I remember going to the Gurdwara and everybody taking their gold off and giving it, right? I remember our parents crying nonstop. They would watch the news narrative of the Western world on Sikhs and called us terrorists then too. It was, you know, I remember growing up, there's very little people wearing the stars. As soon as 84 happened, so many more Gursikh happened. So that horrible loss to us gained us our culture back, right? And now what it is with the indigenous community, the last school closed in 1986, right? So it's fairly new. So we're talking 3 generations of individuals. I mean, to be fair, we can't compare ourselves to indigenous. They were 80% were raped. They were injected with TB. If their parents tried to take them home, their parents, the Royal Mounted Police would arrest their parents. They're still under the government. So I hate to compare, but they've had it much rougher for generations. Because at least we got the opportunity to be, you know, athletes, politicians, those are the things. They had it very, very tough, Omar. They still have it tough. We have something called Murdered and Missing Women's Inquiry. We have tons of indigenous women that go missing every year. And the police are like, oh, just another Native woman. You know, so they're raised by their grandfather's parents that are all traumatized and they have no parenting skills. We didn't lose parenting skills. Our parents didn't lose those skills. So we kept our identity. So put it this way, could you imagine if they stripped our identity in 84? We'd be a lot worse off, wouldn't we? Our identity got stronger after 84.
Yeah.
What a difference.
And do you think that that strengthening of the identity after 1984 was a form of a traumatic response?
Absolutely. And that's what Chanti Kala part is. Like, so they have a ceremony called a potlatch, similar to a Khandapat Sahib. It's multiple days. If they had potlatches, they were thrown in jail.
Wow. Wow.
So they have them now, but it wasn't until the 90s they could start doing them again. So,
and a lot of the trauma that extends from 1978, if we're being, you know, exact, 1978 to the mid 90s. Do you think that some of the trauma that the community, that the Sikh community, the Punjabi community faced in 1947 during partition, and then not seeing proper representation or appreciation within India, played a part and continues to play a part in the traumatic response that the community has today?
I mean, if we're being honest, we got played in 1947, didn't we?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we were like, going up. We'll
take
get
care
you
of
guys.
you. Yeah.
Because we were the best fighters, philanthropists, and farmers. They needed us. Because when it's the front lines, it's the Sikhs that die, right, in the war.
Yeah.
We're not terrorists when we die for India. We're only terrorists if we ask for rights. Okay? Yeah. So now what happened was, in 47, what they did to us was, we had the migration, right? Some families came over, some, you know, all this time happened. What happened was, the systematic system, a lot of people talk about how they had very little land in what is Pakistan now. And when they came here, they took over bigger land. So we learned that little corruption piece in 47, right? And then the corruption of the government, the RSS, the government, even the Sant at one time were close with Indira Gandhi. Then they realized what was happening was horrific. The government's always had a pulse on us, right? And now we look at the farmers' protest, 6 months. It's like no one cares. It's like, oh yeah, okay, that's fine. They're on the streets. We don't have like when we had Sant Darbar, we had strong leadership. We don't have strong leadership, brother. You're you're Sikh. Oh, are you Ravidasya? Are you Kuka? Are you Anand? There's like 8 different labels.
Yeah.
And in BC here, we have the other label. Do you sit on a chair or do you sit on the ground? Like, how funny is that?
Yeah.
And our community is divided, man.
One of the things that you mentioned, about my job, just to mention, I'm a DA. I've tried a number of different types of cases, and one of the units that I was assigned to was domestic violence. And one of the things that was very common to see was, and you touched on this a little bit, that kids that see their father being alcoholic, they have 1 or 2 responses, right? Kids that see their father being abusive, statistics show they're like 1,000 times more likely to become abusive. If they're a male, if they're a female, they're I think it's like 4 to 5 times more likely to get involved in an abusive relationship, or to be violent, right? So that trauma has an ability to corrupt and cause people to do things and abuse others. Do you think that part of when you mention the leadership, that we have this corrupt leadership, something aside, when you talk about the leadership, Captain Badal, all these people that have come into power, and they're old, right? These guys are ancient. They just won't go away. But is one of the, do you think that they're the corruption and the leadership that they have, or the corruption in their leadership is a result? Sorry, my phone out there.
Right. So their corruption is a part of what? Sorry, you said, brother?
The last is a traumatic response that essentially it's like, let's get over on people because things are bad.
We're the baby Vatican. Our politics and our religion merge when they never should. Our religious system was set. I mean, we even gave Sajja to Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Think about that. Now the Babas control it, the Kal Tak.
Yeah.
Right? our governing board, you know, like you go to Gurukar, right? How many granthis are getting busted for diddling kids? They're everywhere, okay? Why are we hiring untrained people to do these jobs, right? We have such a high level of sexual assault in our community, brother. It's astonishing, but we don't talk about it. And if we do talk about it, they blame the victim. Now, what it is we have a little bit of a like, we complain a lot, but who votes those people in, right? We vote them in. So I think what it is, you know, and that's why, you know, we're involved with KhalsaAid, because we want to people see Sikhi as a positive, as no boundaries. We assist everybody. But look at the troubles they give Amarpreet guys in India, right? So for a Sikh, no good deed goes unpunished. You know, think about that. For a Sikh, no good deed goes unpunished. No matter what we do, we're always going to be punished for it. And that's just what we got to accept. And I hope it shifts. I really hope. I mean, look in Canada. Look how many political leaders we have, and you know, our defense minister is a Sikh. You know, we you know, and you guys are heading that direction too now with your politicians and your educated people. But the thing is, right? We can't even agree on 84. We can't agree on that. You go to Gurdwara right now, anywhere in North America, ask them what their thoughts are. There's going to be several different schools of thought.
And do you think, and I'm glad you said that, because I want to bring it back to our topic, which is trauma in 1984 and the violence that ensued in the decade and a half after that, and all the way through farmers' protest. Do you think that some of that that other opinion of 1984 was wrong, or blaming Santji, blaming the Singh, blaming the Karkus? Do you think part of that is a trauma response? I mean, I've seen it in domestic violence where a lot of times kids and even the victim themselves will sometimes take on the blame instead of assigning the blame to the actual accuser or the person that's committed the violence.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, there's obviously outside forces that were trying to blame Santji, right? Then there's the government that was doing it. Then there's the RS that's trying to do it, right? Then there's our own people that think because they read one book, they know everything, right? The one thing we should all agree on is genocide. We should all agree on that, right? We should all agree on Sikhs were picked out and murdered. We should agree on that rape was used as a war tool. We should agree on that 6 times the army force needed went in to try to take us down. Those are all things we can agree on that are facts. If we stick to facts, we'll be able to find a resolve. If we stick to like nonsense, like this happened, that, listen, if there's 1 or 2 guys or a dozen guys in Santji's crew that were bad apples, that happens in the police too, right? That happens in the FBI. It happens everywhere. So we shouldn't focus on that. Our focus should be on why we're not designated as a genocide. Our focus should be as why does, like the Nishan Sahib that happened a couple months ago. Look at the trigger response we saw there, right?
Yeah. Even within our own community, and correct me if I'm wrong. Is some of that blaming ourselves or blaming our own people a way to
definitely
get power back? Hey, we could have fixed this. We can avoid this. When in reality, we were going to get blamed and accused anyways.
So I'll give you an example you can relate with. If someone's been assaulted, a lot of times they think, what if? What if I didn't go there? What if I didn't talk back? What if I wasn't wearing those clothes?
Yeah.
That's all it is. That's all it is.
So it's attempting to get some power back and some control back that, hey, next time I can avoid being a victim if I were to change something rather than I was assaulted or wronged by someone.
It's definitely characteristics of a victim. It's a characteristic of the oppressed. If you read older books on apartheid and Jewish books, they blame themselves as well.
And I think as a community, we have a tough time admitting that we were victimized, right? I mean, we can talk about how we were victimized, but we sort of say, but yeah, you can't get over on us, when in fact people are getting over on us left and right. So what can we as a community do to recognize trauma, treat trauma, and start the conversation to understand what we've been through and how we can fix it?
Okay, so you've heard of restorative justice.
Yes.
It's a big thing in Canada here. I was very involved with it. We never even got restorative justice. We didn't even have our Hindu brothers and sisters admit to us what happened was wrong. The big part that we're missing is being recognized. Okay? So you cannot forgive until an apology is given. There's been no apology. There's been no, like, we've wronged your community. There's been denial. There's been blame. There's been all these things, but there has never, like, when I talk to my Hindu friends, which I love, but they're my brothers and sisters, they're like, well, Hindus died. I'm like, yeah, 1 to every 20, maybe 1 to every 25. There's a big difference there, So,
and no Sikh will ever celebrate that. No Sikh will ever say we're glad that they died. No Sikh will ever say that. Never.
So now, someone sent me a video yesterday of the Shiv Sena guy, going on and trying to say that he's going to do this, disgrace us this way. You know what? Until the community reaches out to us and acknowledges what's happened to us, and we have the right leader in place that forces that, then we can move. We'll never, we can move forward, but we're not going to forget. That's why I love that, never forget 1984. We're never going to forget it, but we can accept it and process it. Okay? Yeah. There's a big thing in that. We don't even have to forgive. We don't have to forgive, but we can accept, process, and move forward with dignity.
Okay. And and that's like on a global scale, on what as a community our goal should be, which I think we're moving towards, of never letting anybody forget. And Dr. Ritu Kaur, she made a post, and it didn't get a lot of attention or repost. But what she said is, everything will be remembered. And I thought, wow, that's so powerful, right? It's an action statement. It's not we won't forget, but we're gonna remember everything. Yeah. We'll remember every little thing that you did to us. Yeah. And sometimes people say, oh, you have to forgive and forget. And I heard somebody say that once, and I said, we haven't forgot what happened to the Shote Sahib that day, and you think we're going to forget what happened 35 years ago? No. So that's the global picture of continue to work towards having what happened to us recognized, having it properly designated as a genocide that happened then, and that has been ongoing in different forms, whether it's a physical genocide or whether it's trying to wipe out our history, our leadership, our cultures, our values, break us apart into different jate, whatever it may be. But on a smaller scale, within our own smaller communities, your gurdwara, your families, how do we go about recognizing trauma or talking about trauma and working towards discussing it in a healthy, positive, and productive way?
Let's talk about families, because I'm not that intelligent enough to ever figure Gurdwara out, okay? So we'll look at our families. It's talking to our children about it, okay? It's having open communication with our parents and our grandparents about it. Having dialogue. And like, my kids are asking me questions, Dad, what's this about? And you explain to them, they're like, whoa, that's a big thing. Even my 10-year-old said, whoa, they did that to it? They put tanks there? They show them pictures, right? Yeah. And discussion's important. Education's important. But you know what's really important? Having dialogue with our Western friends in our offices, letting them know what happened. In BC, we got a lot of negative press for tables and chairs, right? I always take every opportunity to explain to them. Like when we're doing Save Up for KhalsaAid, we get their voice. And we need to tell our colleagues and our friends, hey, I'm going to send you a couple of videos or a couple of papers. Read it. This is what happened to my community, if you're curious. 9 times out of 10, your friends want to know. Your friends really care. Yeah. Well, those 10 friends of yours will tell 10 more people. That's how that goes. Our community already knows what happened to us. They already know, bro. Our kids need to learn more, but they know. Let's educate North America on this is what happened to our community. This is why the Dastar is so important to us. This is why our Guru Kar is so important to us. This is why Nishan Sahib means the world to us. This is why our Guru Granth Sahib, we don't allow people to tamper with it, and they'll ask out of curiosity, right? Our history is so rich. Like now they're saying, Guru Nanak Dev Ji walked to the Vatican. Like when we look at our history and we look at our humanitarian, and then we look at our levels of wars that we fought, it is phenomenal. But where our community is making a mistake? How many kids, you have little kids like I do, how many good kids cartoons do we have? Very little. Besides a couple of Mool Mantra videos, we don't have proper engaging cartoons. Our Hindus and brothers and sisters, look at their cool stuff they got a cartoon about Bhim. He's a big, strong guy like Hercules. We can have that about Banda Singh Bahadur. We can have that about Hari Nalwa. Why don't we? We have the money. So we got to ask our community, why aren't we doing it? Because my kids will watch that Bhim stuff or Shaktiman, whatever. And then I look for the Sikh equivalent, and they're not good, right? They're not high quality. So we're to blame for that. The Chote Sahibzade was good, but I'm talking about the preschoolers, right? Let's do more. Let's have education. We did a good job with our Punjabi industry with music and Bhangra. Okay? We took that international.
On that. We can do a whole other live on that.
Yeah, but we took it international, and that actually kept some of our language alive. We have to give them credit where credit is due. They kept some of our language alive. But let's do better with our Sikhi stuff, right? And that's where, could you imagine growing up if there was Baba Bandar Singh or Hari Singh Nalwa cartoons? That gives you a couple extra reps to the gym. Like the pride you have. Or, our kids that are into humanitarianism. We talk about Guru Nanak Dev Ji's, what he's done for the world. So, what do we do instead? We rely on ourselves to educate our children. We are under-resourced and under-materialized for our culture, and we have to admit it, and our scholars have to do something about it now, and let's support it. If some young girl writes a book about Sikhi for kids, let's go buy it.
Yeah. Some of what you said, there was a period of probably, a good 30 years after 1984 that a lot of information didn't get out, and now we have a lot more information, but we're very poor historians. If you ask people about Baba Deep Singh Ji, they'll tell you he was 75 years old, he had a Tara Sir da Khanda, and he fought with his head on his hand. And that's true. It's beautiful. That's the most amazing part of his story on the surface level, right? But when you think about what did he do for 75 years to get to the point to be able to do that, right? That, I think, is the larger message that has more value to the community. And now we are getting more like Surinder Singh Talking Punjab. He has like a 50-part series, interviews with people that were there in 1984, eyewitnesses to the attack, who provide so much more insight on how many Singh there actually were fighting. There was probably 65 to 70, not the 300 to 400. Eyewitnesses to some of the prominent Singh and their Shahidi. And there's more information coming out, and I think that's a wonderful thing. But there's still a lot of people that were there that don't talk about it. And I think part of it is the trauma, but part of it is humility. They don't want to say, I was there, I was part of the attack, or I fought, or something. One example that I can think of is there's a Singh, I think he's moved back now, but he was at the Tracy Gurdwara, it's a Damdami Taksal Gurdwara, and he did a Kirtan, and his Kirtan was simple, but so amazing. Everybody would say your hair stands on end. And it's probably about 6-7 years ago that he was doing Kirtan, and it was this week, right? June, first week of June. and he was doing kirtan, and he said, I don't like to talk about this. He said, but so many people have asked me, so I'm going to tell you. He said, I was 16 years old, and I was inside Akal Takht Sahib during the attack. He said, and Sant Bhandrawale told me personally, your job is not to fight. Your job is to continue doing kirtan until your last breath.
About that.
And
I heard about that, yeah.
he, I think the video was actually in Canada.
Yeah.
A bullet went through his harmonium and shot him,
Yeah.
and he was wounded. But how do we get people that were there, that were part of the movement or victimized later on in the ensuing violence and into the 90s? How do we get them to share their story with the wider community?
Thank you.
So that it can be a part of the healing process.
We have some of the most sophisticated music videos out there. Jazzy B has done $2 million videos. Okay, we can do pretty cool documentaries, right?
Yeah.
We need support. We need support, and if we approach it in a respectful manner and say to these Baba and Bibiya, we need your voice heard. Every elder we lose, we're losing a library.
Yeah.
Okay. Some of them are like losing a university.
Yeah.
When we lost Sant Miskinji, we lost a couple campuses.
Yeah.
Okay? So we need to document it. We're an oral culture. Okay? That's why we survived. We're an oral culture. So we need to document that, and we need to, get these guys that are making these music videos to make documentaries like Vice, like high quality documentaries where they're Punjabi and in English transcribed. And it'll be powerful. It will happen. It will happen, but I hope it happens before it's too late. And this is the other thing. Good friends of mine are like, oh, we don't take our kids to Gurdwara, all they do is fight. And that's a two-part reaction. Number one, yeah, it happens a little bit. Number two, that's a cop-out for my friends. Okay?
Yeah.
If we don't take our kids to Gurukar, how are they going to know why this happened, what we're fighting for?
And if you stay home, how are you going to fix the issues that are there? If you're going to leave it in the hands of people that are fighting.
You can't. So like my kids, yeah, they call it Waiguruji, whatever. They're excited about Prashad. They give Kleenexes out. They know when they go there, they got to stay quiet, respectful. As they age, they'll learn more, right? And we can't, we have to make it fun and interactive for them. What I love about the town I live in, our elders, when my kids are screaming, they tell my wife, don't say anything to your kids. That's what kids do.
Yeah.
I've been to other gurukars where they look at you like you did a crime because your kid's crying, right? So we have to understand. And the other thing is, my one benti, and I promised myself I wouldn't talk about gurukars, but my one benti to the gurukars is bring in educated granthis. Please don't bring your cousin or your wife's relative just because he can do a little bit of kirtan and sanki. No, bring in educated people. Yeah. There's a gurukar in Calgary, and they only bring in PhD level people.
Yeah.
So we need to change that. If our teachers don't know what they're talking about, that's pretty sad, man.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I went to San Jose Gurukar. I'm so impressed by them, right? They had so many classrooms, and they're teaching kids. And I don't know how it is now, but this is several years ago. My wife's muster was in the committee, but they were trying. They were bringing kids in. They were educating them. Other teachers are volunteering. If we look at a Smiley community, the Aga Khan community, they give their people interest-free business loans, free tutoring, free coaching.
Yeah.
They all pump each other up. Omar, if you went and bought a big building, half your buddies in your family are going to be upset. Well, how could he buy it? They'll probably say he's taking money from KhalsaAid.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my point is, let's stop kitching each other's latta, man. Let's work with each other and find solutions. And you know what? It's okay being corrected. Don't take it personally. If someone's correcting you, that's okay. Even if you're right, that's okay. The time will come that they'll realize, hey, you know what? That Kim had a point. Don't take it personal.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Kim, for coming on. I think we had a great discussion, and I think there's a lot of points to think about. And the main thing that makes me feel really good is we're a community that has faced so much trauma, continues to face so much trauma. You know, there's glimpses of what has happened to us in 47, 84, into the 90s at the farmers' protest. But it's very comforting to know that the spirit of Jardi Kala is so therapeutic in the process.
That was a great question you asked. Trauma vortex. Think about trauma and think about Jardi Kala. Back and forth.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you asked that.
If we had to leave everybody with action points, I think to sum up what you said essentially is, you know, we need to talk to one another, make sure that we have open dialogue with each other, we exchange information. We make sure that our information gets out to everybody else, and that our push to make sure that what happened to us is properly referred to as genocide. That we recognize what happened to us and what is happening to us, and that as a community we come together, we do better, and we're a better support for one another. I want to throw one last disclaimer in there before we end this, and that's simply this. This is a discussion. You know, this isn't a therapy session. This is me and Kim Faji having a conversation.
Yes.
If you need to talk to somebody, you know, do that. So, this is the start of a conversation, not the end of a conversation.
So I have a page called @Hookum Wellness. Hookum was my Baba's name. It's not a play in the Guru Granth Sahib. It's my Baba's name, okay? So Hookum Wellness. There's a guy called Mon Counseling, and there's a we're going to be giving out more Punjabi resources. The other thing is every state and province has their own mental health pages. In Canada, we have it in Punjabi as well. So please talk to your family doctor. Look at those resources. If you've got any questions and I can help you, refer you somewhere, get a hold of me at Bear Homes Ltd or Hookum Wellness.
Great. And if anybody that's listening knows anybody that makes documentaries or knows anybody or does themselves, you know, we've called you out now. We want you to produce high quality informational stuff for kids and for adults on what our community has gone through and our responses to it. So thank you very much, Baji, for coming on, and hopefully we can get together again and do some more brainstorming on how we can help everybody come together and be stronger together.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate the savor that you're doing in the U.S., my friend.
Thank you. You guys too.
Yeah, stay Chardi Kala.
Definitely. All right, buddy.